Hello gamers, my name is Spark, and today I'm going to show you an awesome, easy, one-of-a-kind tool that you can use at your D&D or other TTRPG table. In this video I'm going to show you a brothel generator. This is a great tool for GMs who want to add a little bit of flavor to their communities, cities, or burgs. If you're a player and you think this would be a good fit for the campaign that you're playing in, send us over to your GM. Be advised, I built this generator mostly for D&D 5e, you're going to see some of those races involved, but with just a little bit of tweaking, you can make this generator fit any TTRPG. Here's how this video is going to go. For starters, I'm going to show you the basics of how this tool works and how you can use it at your table. Then I'm going to show you what's happening behind the scenes to make the generator work and how you can customize it to better fit your campaign. So let's take a look at what we have. We have some settings up here in the top, and then we have three areas where results are generated down here below. Let's start off with the settings because it's pretty simple. You can decide the quality of the brothels that are generated here in this generator, anywhere from seedy up to opulent. This works on a very simple checkbox system. Whichever boxes are checked, those types of brothels can be generated. So if you only want nice and opulent brothels generated, then turn those three off, and you will only have brothels generated of the nice or opulent quality. This allows you to customize the types of brothels that might be present within your city or the area in which you're trying to generate for your world. Next over here we have the brothel name setting, and you can choose between random and suitable. Setting the brothel name to random means that the name of the brothel will be entirely random. But if you set it to suitable, what this means is that opulent brothels will have more refined or classy names, whereas seedy brothels will have more grossy type names. We'll go ahead and show you what some of that looks like here in a second. The next setting is pro traits. Pro is short for professional. These are the adult workers of the brothel. And when you click generate, you will get either general traits that they possess or specific traits. I will show you what that looks like as well. We have number of professionals in the brothel. You can set that to random or you can set that to suitable. Again, we'll take a look at that. We have the currency that is used. Are we charging copper pieces, silver pieces, or gold pieces? If you look over right here, we can see that they're charged an hourly. If you look down here, we can see that they charge an hourly rate and a nightly rate, and so this will determine whether it's copper, silver, or gold. And then the last setting is how many brothels would you like to generate? So the settings are pretty simple. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the results. To turn the generator on, all you have to do is click the checkbox. Now, of course, it probably goes without saying that there is a little bit of sexual innuendo in these results and in this generator, so PG-13 warning. Okay, we have here three different levels of brothels. We have an opulent, a decent, and a seedy. Let's start off by looking at the name. So the opulent brothel is the Glimmering Reward. We see its popularity, and the word several here suggests that as your players walk into the brothel, how many people do they see in the lounge or the foyer or what have you? Several. Number of pros, in this case this place has 4 professionals, and we can see them listed over here to the right. We have Kill, Waneen, Lulith, and Dennis. For each of these professionals, we do get their ASR, which stands for age, sex, and race. We get their popularity on a scale of 1 to 5, where more stars represents a higher rating. We can get their best trait. This is where we come back up here to these settings. In this case, the traits are general, and so we say things like beauty, endurance, versatility, voice. These are those professionals' best traits. Later, I will adjust some of these settings so that you can see the differences. We have their hourly rate and their nightly rate, in this case listed in silver pieces because that's how we set it up here in the settings. We have their sexual preference, and we have the DC to impress. Now, of course, in D&D 5e, there's the DC, or the difficulty challenge, that represents how difficult is it for the player to do something, and in this case, how difficult is it if that player were to spend some time with that professional? How difficult would it be for them to impress that professional? And so what is the skill check? That's entirely up to you as the DM. You might use sleight of hand, you might use athletics, you might use acrobatics. That is totally up to you, but that would be the DC there. Let's come back over here to the main results. We have the madam or the mister, so it'll either be a mister or a madam. In this case, we have Madam N.I.C.E, who is an old female elf. She's the one who's in charge of the Glimmering Reward brothel. And underneath that, we get a brief description of the structure that is this brothel. So in this case, it's a tiny one-story structure of vine and brush-covered walls, adorned with scarlet fur drapes and sable lanterns. The interior is dimly lit and gloomy. That makes sense if they are sable lanterns. This gives you something that you can easily read to your players as they approach the brothel or enter it that saves you some of that creative energy that you might need. This does give us some details about the madam or mister. In this case, Madam N.I.C.E is strict and unforgiving of her pros, and they deride her. So this helps you understand a little bit of maybe what the political situation is or the climate is there in the building, should your players ever wind up interacting with any of the professionals for quest-related activities or anything like that. And then you also get a percentage likelihood of your players contracting an STI should they decide to visit and sample some of the services available here at this brothel. And really that's it. Those are the results that we get for a given brothel. You can come down here and you can see we have a whole different set of results for the secret column, and then you have the constricting pillow. And I would like to remind you that with the brothel names you can do more suitable or more general. So if you would like to pause this video and take a look at those other 2 brothels that were generated to get a better taste of the variety that can be generated, feel free to do so. That being said, let me show you what some of the differences are with the brothel names when they are suitable. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to just generate seedy taverns, and you can see some of these brothel names are a little gross, a little potent, maybe. Let's generate another set. Some of them are okay, some of them not so much. But now let's switch that up to opulent, and you'll notice that there's a little bit of a flavor change in the brothel names. And so the quality of the brothel will affect the refined nature of the name. If it's set to suitable, if it's set to random, then that won't matter whatsoever. Let's take a look at the pro traits. We saw them on general. We can see we have 5 right here: versatility, technique, endurance, technique, companionship. If we switch that to specific, you'll notice we have much more specific traits, which will give the pros a little bit more of a unique quality or flavor to them, should your players or you care at all. My wife and I kind of disagreed on this one as we were making this generator together. I felt like the general was better, the general traits, because it allowed you, the GM, more versatility in describing whatever you wanted of who that character was or who that NPC was. My wife liked the more specific to remove that creative energy necessary to add that depth to those NPCs, so you get to decide. Now, with number of pros, it was set to suitable previously, and what that's going to do is that's going to restrict the number of pros that are in the brothel based upon the size of that brothel. So notice down here, we've set this to random, and so notice down here this says it's a tiny one-story structure, and yet we have 28 professionals. In my opinion, that's not really suitable to the story. It would make sense that a tiny structure would have fewer pros, but that's entirely up to you. If you want to allow for that kind of random creation of the story of this location, absolutely you can set that to random. Otherwise, you can leave it on suitable. The next thing that you're going to want to be aware of here in this generator is if we scroll down, you'll notice we have the storage area, which I call the yellow pages. And this is a place for you to store previously generated brothels that you want to save so that you can use them later in the future. So I'm going to scroll back up here for a second and notice what happens when I hit the delete key. You see how it's all recycling? Everything down here that's changing are what are called dynamic cells. And a dynamic cell will refresh or regenerate itself anytime anything changes anywhere inside of the sheet, which is really good for random generation, but is really bad for us when we want to save things for longer periods of time. So for example, if you wanted to save the sticky hose, if this was the brothel that you had in your neighborhood of your city that your players are in, and you want to save that, but then at any time accidentally you press any key, well, now that's gone forever and you'll never get it back. No edit undo will ever bring that back. Now it's gone. So this allows you, this storage area down here at the bottom allows you to save any of these brothels. So let's say that you want to save these 3 brothels that you've generated. So how are you going to do that? You're going to select all 3 areas, all 3 regions, all 3 results. You're going to copy that, You're going to come down into the yellow pages, you're going to expand stack number 1, and now you'll notice that stack number 1 is formatted exactly like the 3 are above that we just copied. You'll come up here into the top left corner, you're going to right click, paste special, values only. And now you'll notice that all 3 of those brothels are here, and watch what happens when I hit the delete key. Nothing changes. Because we have pasted values only, we have lost all of the random formatting that causes all of those cells to be dynamic, which means these are now permanent and they'll only go away once we press backspace or delete on them directly. Now this is stack number 1, and you'll notice up here in the storage area it does tell you that stack number 1 has 0 openings now, but watch what happens if I delete this 3rd brothel down here and everything inside. It lets you know that there is 1 opening. You can collapse this storage area with that little plus button over there on the left, and so now you have those 2 brothels saved inside of stack number 1 without taking up a bunch of screen space, and this lets you know that there are 2 brothels saved in there. You can come in and add whatever notes you want to help you remember what's inside of stack number 1, and then when you're done with those, maybe you copy and paste those into your notes somewhere else. Once you're done with these, you just come in, highlight, press delete. You'll notice that it says that you've got 3 openings again. You can minimize that, replace that back, and now you're right where you started and back up here to continue generating your results. And so that's it for the basic functionality of the brothel generator. This isn't my only generator, by the way. I have dozens of others that I think you'll find really interesting. This table that you see on screen now is a list of all the generators that I've created and which of them at the time of publishing this video have video tutorials like this one. All of my random generators are available online at buymeacoffee.com. Links are in the description below. If you're enjoying this video, now would be a great time to share it with other gamers. Please hit the like button and subscribe, it really helps me out. Now let's get into the customization side of things. It's customization that sets my random generators apart from all the others. If you're a widely experienced GM, this probably isn't your first random generator that you've ever toyed around with, but it will probably be your last because no other random generator that you've used has allowed you to customize the code and the master lists so you can personally craft your own spectrum of results. So let me show you how to do that now. What you're going to do is you're going to come down here to the left corner where you see the brothel ref. All of my generators have a reference tab that makes everything function. This is the back end, the machine, the mechanics, the guts of the generator that makes it all function. I have it currently broken down into 4 sections, and you can see that they're all collapsed at present. Let's go ahead and expand the names section, and you see that we have 6 sets of columns. We have all, and then we have seedy, poor, decent, nice, and opulent. We have adjectives, and we have nouns. So if we look back over here at the brothel, in this case we have the blooming strokes. Where did that come from? We have adjective and we have noun. So blooming, there's blooming right there in the adjective list, and then strokes might be somewhere down in this list. And how the generator works is it picks something out of an adjective column and something out of a noun column, puts those 2 together to create the brothel name. Now you'll notice that we have seedy, poor, decent, nice, and opulent, and this is how, when you have the settings set to suitable for a brothel name, this is how you determine the types of names that can be generated. So notice here we have the Silken Cockatrice is a seedy place, seedy quality brothel, and so because this was generated as seedy, it knew to only pick an adjective and a noun from the seedy columns here in columns D and E. So how do you customize this list? Well, you can add or remove to any of these lists as you want to, but notice over here, columns B and C, there's a note right here that says do not edit these. Indeed, do not edit anything in columns B and C. If you want to edit the adjectives and nouns that are available for brothel names, you're only going to do that in columns D through M. So let's say that you don't want the word body in this list of adjectives. How do you remove that so that it will never be generated? Well, you could just click delete, but the problem with doing that is now you've left a hole in that list, and we never want to leave a hole in a list. So rather than just pressing delete, you're going to want to right click, delete cells, shift cells up. Now body is gone without there being a hole left in its absence. So that's how you're going to remove things from these lists. But what if you want to add something to these lists? And you can see these lists are pretty long. For the CD adjectives, we have about 272 of them. So if you wanted to add more things to the list of possible adjectives that can be generated, you'll just type in whatever you want to type at the bottom of the list. And you can do this theoretically forever. You can have thousands and thousands of entries in a column, and it will randomly pull from that full list. So now that I've typed in the word new here at the bottom, it now is theoretically possible for a CD tavern to have new be part of its name, because now the word new is here in the list. These are what we call infinite lists. This means that there's no bottom to them. You can keep adding to them as far down as you want to go. So this section is how you are going to edit the names of the brothels that can be generated. Let's close that one and open up the Appearance Plus section. For starters, let's take a look over here at the brothel size. So you have 5 different sizes of brothels. You can have tiny, small, average, large, or huge. And notice that there are a bunch of blank spaces right here. These blank spaces are for you to add things in if you want to. Now this is not an infinite list. You are capped down here at the end of row 15. But between rows 4 and row 15, you could add anything in there that you want to. If you wanted to add more diversity to the size or something, you totally could. Otherwise, you can just leave these alone. But then over here, we have story. In other words, how tall, how many stories is this structure? Now, for a tiny sized building, it's always going to be 1 story. Now, that's how I have it set up. However, if you want there to be the option of a tiny multiple story building, then you can do what we have down here in the small building. So if you look up here, this is called the formula bar. And these numbers are being randomly generated. To demonstrate that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the delete key, and I want you to watch cell P5 right here. You'll notice how those numbers are cycling. That's because those are functions called ran-between functions. And so what it's saying is it will randomly generate a number between 1 and 2. If we look down here at the huge story size, you'll see that it randomly generates a number between 1 and 4. You can change both of these numbers. So for example, if you thought a huge building should have a minimum of 2 floors and a maximum of 10, and you can see that it randomly generated 6 in this case because 6 is between 2 and 10. So you can change those settings on any of these. But again, this first one is not a ran between function, it's just the number 1. So if you do want that to be a ran between function, then what you're going to do is you're just going to come down here to P5, you're going to copy that formula precisely, click back up here on P4, replace the 1 with that formula, press enter, and then you can change those numbers to reflect whatever you want. And now you can see that we have different formulas for those different sized buildings. And if you add more things down in here in this list, then you can copy and paste into the formula bars for each one of these cells as well. You can ignore these 3 gray cells down here. They're just part of the function of the generator. Scroll down underneath that and we do have our various types of popularity. In this case, the ardent smirk is a vacant place, not very popular at all. Where does that word come from? It comes from right there. And so you can add or replace anything in this list. It is a capped list, so you only have between cells 22 and 30 of column O. But yeah, you can add or remove to that if you'd like. And then over here in columns Q through U, these are more endless lists that will help to create the building and its description. So notice right here, this is what I call the Mad Lib, and this is the sentence structure that gets produced over here in the results. So notice that the results here say a tiny 1-story structure of black and white marble. A size, which gets generated from this list right here. Number, which gets generated from this list right here. Story structure, description of walls, and that's this column, adorned with drapes, drapes material, lanterns, and feeling or mood. So you can add or remove to these lists to cultivate or generate the type of flavor that you want your buildings to possibly have. That's it for this section. We can minimize that and open up the pros. Starting from left to right here, we have a series of min-max functions for the number of pros that might be working in a brothel based upon that brothel's size. Now this will only play if you have number of pros set to suitable. If you have number of pros set to random, it will generate between the lowest number of tiny and the highest number of huge. But if you have it set to suitable, then if the tavern is tiny, it'll generate between 1 and 5. If the tavern is small, between 2 and 10, and so forth. You can change these numbers. So if you wanted to have the huge tavern have a minimum of 10, you could just change that to 10, and now it will generate pros between 10 and 40. Just make sure, if you are adjusting these numbers, just make sure that the minimum is always equal to or less than the maximum. Scrolling to the right just a tiny bit, we have the base hourly rate. Again, this is a min-max table based upon the quality of the brothel. The thought process being that seedy brothels will probably charge less than opulent brothels. So in this case, it's between 5 and 10 what? Well, either copper, silver, or gold pieces based upon your settings over here on the main page. This table is a multiplier table to help us generate the for the night multiplier. So if we come back here at the results, we see that we have the hourly rate for Mackenzie, and then we have the nightly rate. How does the nightly rate get generated? It's going to take the hourly rate and it's going to multiply it by the appropriate number. So if the brothel is of poor quality, it'll multiply it by 2. If it's of decent quality, it'll multiply it by 2.5. So it randomly generated a number between 20 and 35. Well, wait a minute. 15 isn't between 15 and 35. So what happened? That's where we scroll down. You can ignore these numbers right here, by the way. We can scroll down to this table, and these are additional modifiers where the price of the professional is based upon the popularity of that professional. So if we come back here, we see that Mackenzie is a single star popularity, which means that her price is also multiplied by 0.5, or in other words, it's halved. And then we also are going to change the price based upon the popularity of that brothel, which in this case is a few, and a few is right here. So whatever number we were sitting at as we've been going through all these multipliers, it's also multiplied by 0.9. And when you do all these multiplications together, that's how we end up with Mackenzie's hourly price being 15 and her nightly price being 36. You can change all of these multipliers. If you have it set at 1, that will not increase or decrease the price. Anything above 1 will increase the price. Anything below 1 will decrease the price. But I do want to come back over here and take a look at this table right here, these 3 columns. This is called an odds table. And what this does is this determines the percentage likelihood of a professional having any one of these 5 ratings. So what these percentages right here tell you is that there is a 22% chance of any given professional that's generated over here in the results having a 3-star rating. There's an 18% chance of them having a 5-star rating, and so forth. You add all 5 of these numbers up, and you're going to end up at 100%. You can change these percentages. So if you want to make the 5-star rating less likely or more likely or whatever, you can change all of these percentages, but do make sure that they add up to 100%. If they don't, it might break the generator. So that's it for columns Y and Z. If we scroll to the right a little bit, we have the demographics section, and these are all just a series of odds tables like I just explained over there to the left. So what is the likelihood of your professionals' ages? There's a 75% chance that they're young adult, 20% chance of adult, and 5% chance that they're old. Again, you can change these percentages, make sure they add up to 100%. Percentage odds of the madam or mister's age, odds are right there. Percentage chance of the professional's gender, percentage chance of the madam or mister's gender, percentage chance of the race. So we have a 75% chance that the professional is of the dominant race, or the madam or mister is of the dominant races, or of the minority races. Which races are dominant or minority? You get to decide that here in this table. So any races that in your world are considered more dominant or have a higher populace, you would put that in this column. Any races that are minority races, less likely, you'd put them in that column. This is all meant to reflect that minority races should be seen less often in these random generators than the majority races or dominant races. If you scroll down underneath that, you'll see you've got all these tables right here. Ignore all of that. That's all just functionality. Scrolling to the right, we have 2 columns for their best trait. For general traits, if you have the settings up here set to general, then that's going to pull out of column AD right here. And this is a capped list, but I've given you plenty of room to add more stuff. And then in column AE, you have specific traits, and that's an endless list, and you can add to that as much as you would like. Scrolling to the right a little bit more, we have an odds table for their preferences. You can change those. Remember how we talked about the DC to impress for our professionals? This is where you determine that. It'll randomly generate between 14 and 24. You can change those numbers. And then what this little table does is this will add an additional modifier if this box is checked. But if that box is checked, then it will add an additional modifier to whatever number is generated here based upon the professional's rating. So for example, maybe the random number that was generated here was 16 because it's between 14 and 24, but that professional has a 5-star rating. So the random number that was generated is 16, but we're going to add 2 to it because they have a 5-star rating, and that's going to give them a DC to impress of 18. If you don't want that to play, you can just uncheck that box, and now their rating will not affect their DC to impress. And then scrolling to the right just a little bit more, we have these 3 columns, and these 3 columns are where we get the names of our madams and mistresses and our professionals. So we have an endless list of male first names, we have an endless list of female first names, and we have an endless list of surnames. You can add or remove to those lists. That's it for that section. We can minimize that. And our last section here are additional details, where we are talking about the attitude and demeanor of the professionals in relation to their madam or mistress. So here's the Mad Lib for that. So the madam or mistress adjective, and this is where you get to decide, is strict but fair with, or whatever you want to put in there. That's an endless list. And then you have how their pros feel about them, and this is an endless list, and you can add or remove to that. And then scrolling to the right for our last little bit here, we have the chance of STI. Do not change any of these blue numbers, but here in the yellow box you can. This is the base percentage chance of contracting an STI if one of your players attends that brothel. So it's going to start off at 15%, but then we're going to modify that number based upon a few different factors. So for example, if the quality of the brothel is nice, then that's going to reduce the likelihood of an STI by 10%. So therefore reducing it down to a 5% chance. We also have popularity. The more popular it is, in other words, the more people who come through, the higher likelihood, and so it'll add that modifier in as well. And then down here is just one final random modifier that isn't based on anything. It's just letting the random generator be random. And it'll randomly generate a number between -10% and 10% and add that to the result to just add more randomness to the world. If you don't want that to play, you can just uncheck that box and it will not add a plus or minus 10% or anything in between those. It will just play off of the modifiers that we've previously discussed. If you do want a little bit more randomness, check that box. And that is it for the customization of the brothel generator. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, I have dozens of other generators, so be sure to check them out here on YouTube or at buymeacoffee.com. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and happy gaming.